Good afternoon, everyone. The big picture of our city right now includes many very positive elements. We're very proud of the fact that this is a safer city than ever. It's a city with more jobs than ever. It's a city where our kids are graduating from our schools at a higher rate than ever. There's a lot of things to be proud of. But there's also problems that we haven't solved that we need to do more on. And homelessness, and particularly street homelessness, remains one of the core challenges that we need to address. Last December, we announced a very different approach. We announced something that had never been tried before on the scale you will now see in this city. We announced the NYC Homeless Outreach and Mobile Engagement Street Action Team, otherwise known as Homestat. You can clap for that. That's good. And there has never been anything like Homestat previously in this city or in any other major city in the country, an absolutely comprehensive approach where we're going to use all the tools of government working with our nonprofit partners to reach folks who are living on our streets, not only some of the time, but on a very, very consistent basis, and to reach people in a way that will make a real change in their lives and the lives of our communities. We are proud to say that Homestat is now up and running. It's still building out, but we have a very robust effort underway now, and it's already starting to make an impact. And today we're going to explain how Homestat is working, how it will build out further, and what it's going to mean for the lives of our communities and for people who are homeless and in need. Let me just thank, there's a lot of people with us because such a huge effort, such a big initiative requires a lot of different leaders and a lot of different elements. I want to thank a number of the people who are here, and you'll hear from some others who will speak after me. I want to thank our Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, Dr. Herminia Blasio, our Chief of Department, FDNY, Jim Leonard. I have to see who else is around me here. Oh, Dan, you are here. Okay. Our Chief Commissioner for the FDNY, Dan Nigro. Our Commissioner for Department of Sanitation, Catherine Garcia. President of the Health and Hospitals Corporation, Ram Raju. The Executive Director of 311, Joseph Morris-Rowe. Mindy Tarlow, the Director of the Mayor's Office of Operations. Dr. George Askew, Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Health. And Chief Bill Morris of the NYPD. And I want to thank officers from the Homeless Outreach Unit of the NYPD who are here with us today. Also, a number of other outreach workers who are part of the Homestat effort are here with us. I want to thank them for the great work they do. You'll be seeing these distinctive vests a lot more around the city. And when you see those vests, it means that someone who is highly trained in how to help the homeless and help them off the streets is on the job and addressing the situation at the front. So I want to thank all the folks who do this important homeless outreach work, including folks who come from organizations such as the Goddard Riverside Community Center, Bronx Works, the Bowery Residents Committee, Project Hospitality, and Breaking Ground. I also want to thank, because we're in her Community Board District, the District Manager for Community Board 3, Susan Stetzer. So people are working together to make Homestat a reality, because we're talking about a complicated problem, a problem that's been going on in this city for decades. It needs a different approach. It needs something much bigger and more comprehensive, and that's what Homestat will be. Now, at the outset, we have to be clear. We see people on the streets, and a lot of times we assume if someone's panhandling, if someone's on the street, that they are homeless. As Commissioner Bratton has often said, there are people who are on our streets during daytime hours who are not homeless. There are some people who panhandle for whatever reason, but that's not because they're homeless. That's a separate challenge that we need to address. But when it comes to folks who are permanently homeless, folks who literally spend 24 hours on the streets, that's a group of people who need a very special kind of help and a very focused kind of help. We know that all over the country, this challenge has been one that local governments have taken on, but no one's cracked the code. No one's come up with the perfect solution. And that's why we had to try something different and bigger and more substantial to try and really change the course of this reality. Homestat is based on the notion that we have to have a plan for each and every person who is homeless on our streets. Literally have to understand each person's situation and what it's going to take to change that situation. Each and every one of the folks living on our streets had a path from a better life to the streets. We need to find them a path from the streets to a better life. We need to help them back to normalcy. We have to help them get back on their feet. And the way to do that is to go out to the homeless, to engage them consistently, to understand what they need, to really drill down and be there every single day to make a difference. And that begins with knowing where people are, understanding the shape of the problem, and measuring literally every single day what's going on our streets. You know, previously, it was an annual count of the homeless taken one day in winter at night. This is very, very different. This is a daily count every day, looking for where the problems and challenges are and looking for where there's people in need. Each day, 32 city workers, this is already happening, are walking every single block from Canal Street to 145th Street, Manhattan. Literally every block from Canal up to 145th. That's 307 street miles a day, over 2,000 miles a week. Right there at the grassroots, looking for the homeless, looking for what their needs are, looking how we can address the situation. In addition, we have teams that focus on 18 hotspots in outer borough areas. It's a moment where I want to note, there used to be for decades in this town, homeless encampments, literally places that were villages in effect where people lived. We ended that practice last year. We don't accept the notion that any homeless person should be living in an encampment. It's not fair to them, it's not fair to our communities. We've ended the homeless encampments and we'll make sure they don't reassert. But there still are hotspots, meaning places where some folks who are homeless 24/7 congregate. And that's a place where we can gather to support them and serve them. Now, starting on May 2nd, these teams that we've trained to do the counting and to figure out the best ways we can support the homeless will fan out all over the city to do nighttime counts as well. We will do those 3 times a year. So we're going to do nighttime counts, which give us a different look at what's happening, but we don't want to just do one annual count. We want to start to do those more often. And all of this information will be made public. Public will be able to see this data at nyc.gov/homestat. In fact, you can visit the site today, and it'll show you what our outreach workers have seen most recently, and the site is constantly going to be updated to show more information as it comes in. The key to this, once we've identified consistently where people are, is to figure out what they need individually. Some people might accept service the first time it's offered. They might accept a warm bed, they might accept medical attention, food, they might accept mental health services or substance abuse services the very first time, but we know that's not typically the case. For a lot of folks, it will take 10 times, 20 times, 50 times being engaged before they'll agree to the help they need. And that's where we take all the tools of government and combine them to help people. Some people will need to access Social Security benefits or veterans benefits that they haven't gotten. We'll help them do it. Some, again, as I said, may need mental health support. We'll get it for them. Or a doctor's visit. We'll arrange it for them. Some people may need to be reconnected with their families. And it'll be our job to find their family members and see if we can reunify them in a productive way. But it all comes down to knowing each individual and what they need. Over 500 staff from city agencies and nonprofits will gather together in this effort. This is a really extraordinary effort to send people out and provide that support. As many of you know, we have been engaged over the last few months in a reevaluation of all our efforts to address homelessness. There was a 90-day review period. And as a result of the 90-day review period, one of the determinations we made was that the Homestat initiative needed a very seasoned leader to bring all the strands together, to take a brand new approach and make it work. We're going to have more to say on other elements of the 90-day review next week and beyond. But today I'm proud to announce that the leadership for the Homestat effort will be provided by our new Senior Homestat Advisor, Dr. Michael Jacobson. Michael is a colleague who many of us have served with in government over the years. He has the distinction of being both an extraordinary public servant who's run big agencies, run big nonprofits, served with distinction in both the Giuliani and Dinkins administrations as both probation commissioner and corrections commissioner. So someone who knows how to deal with very big challenges and knows how to get results. And you'll hear from Michael in just a moment. I want to emphasize that it's not just a leader like Michael and the 500 men and women who are doing the outreach effort and the members of the NYPD homeless outreach team. All of these people are part of the solution, but every New Yorker can also be part of the solution, because every New Yorker can report what they see, and we want people to call into 311. If you see a homeless person in distress, if you know someone has been at the same corner, if you know something that that person needs, call it in. Call it in. We want to find each homeless person and address their needs. So everyone can be eyes and ears in this process and can call 311 with the information they have. Just a few words in Spanish. Me complace anunciar que Homestat, el programa más completo del país para ayudar a personas sin hogar en las calles, ya está trabajando a toda marcha. Nuestros trabajadores caminan más de 2,000 millas por semana, buscando desamparados para conectarlos con los servicios que necesitan. Por favor, recuerden llamar al 311 si ven a alguien que necesite ayuda en nuestras calles. With that, I want to bring forward Michael Jacobson. Again, an extraordinary career in public service, a great sense of how to move both government and the nonprofit sector in common cause. I want to thank him for stepping up for the city in which he was born and bred, a true New Yorker, answering the call to duty, and helping us to innovate what will be a brand new and exciting approach to addressing this problem. Dr. Michael Jacobson.
Thank you, Mayor. The mayor. One of the things the mayor didn't say is that I met the mayor now, sadly, 27 years ago when we were both working for Mayor Dinkins, and I am happy to say, though, that it's clear that neither he nor I have aged a day during that time.
That was believable.
Data-driven. So when he asked me to help out, I was delighted, and it's nice to be working with him and his team again, especially on this issue, especially on homelessness. It's one of the biggest, obviously most complicated social issue. As the mayor was saying, our city faces. It's multi-systemic. It crosses agencies, systems, levels of government. It involves issues of income, mental health, physical health, hugely difficult and complicated family situations, drug and alcohol addiction. And, you know, in the end, it's a hugely vulnerable population, and these folks are our mothers, fathers, brothers, relatives, teenagers, families, veterans, returning prisoners. They are, although they present a lot of quality of life issues, they are one of the most vulnerable populations in the city. We have too many of them living on the streets. And I think with the right help, we can reach them, we can improve their lives, and we will do that. And I think the Homestat approach, the approach that the mayor described briefly, combines, for me, I think the essential elements of what I think of both on an individual level as grand rounds, to use a medical analogy. It's not a perfect analogy, but I think it's right in some ways to deal with the individuals, the most difficult, intractable cases, but where that learning also informs policy and practice, right? So it goes from the individual to policy and from policy to the individual. It can't work without a group of dedicated staff and agency leaders who you see here, and I think the approach is, sort of spot on for the complexity of this issue. As the mayor mentioned quickly, I've spent most of my career in government, either running agencies with Mindy Tarlow. I worked in the budget office as well. I've run large not-for-profits and currently in academia. And the thread, at least for my career, is I've always been involved in one way or another doing this kinds of systemic work, especially work that focuses on vulnerable populations. When I was the commissioner at DOC, we built their version of CompStat. It was called Teams. It was their performance indicator and accountability system. And Teams was hugely integral to driving down violence and overtime and sick time in the early 2000s in DOC. When I was at Vera, we were invited by the city of New Orleans and the federal government to create a pretrial agency in New Orleans where none have existed before, so that people in poverty who were being held could not be released. We built that. We dealt with the hugely complicated systems in New Orleans. New Orleans has since then had one of the most massive jail declines of any city in the United States. More recently at CUNY, where I'm now a professor and run an institute, we created an empirical indicator system to measure inequality over time in New York and other cities. We also oversee a large kind of 20-city effort to work with agencies in those cities to look at racial and ethnic disparities in their criminal justice system and to shrink the size of their incarceration systems. So this HomeStat is the kind of work I love to do. It's hugely important. It's complex. The mayor's put together a great team of committed agency heads. He's asked for real, demonstrable, measurable results that everyone is committed to getting. And in terms of getting folks off the street into safer, more appropriate spaces. And finally, just on a personal note, again, it's not only great to be back and working with the mayor, but also colleagues like Tony Shoris, who was the first deputy mayor, and Mindy Tarlow, the head of operations. We were all worked in OMB back in the day, and it's lovely to be working with old friends and colleagues again. And Mayor, thanks again for asking me to do this.
Thank you. He's a very honest and sincere and believable guy, except for he does look a little different. But other than that, perfect. I want to bring up Commissioner Steve Banks in a moment. I just want to note that over these last months, there's been extraordinary work done, even as HomeStat was being created. You know, we had some really bitter nights over the course of the winter. And so many of our public employees went out to help the homeless. Folks from FDNY, our firefighters, our EMTs went out, brought people in. NYPD, Department of Health, Department of Homeless Services. So many of our first responders and our health workers all saw it as their common responsibility to look for folks in need. And you remember during the Code Blue days, we would tell you about the numbers each day of folks who had been brought in, gotten the help they need, gotten the medical care they need. That is something that every day this city does, looking out for people. But with HomeStat, we're going to be able to do something much more systemic and much deeper and really get to the root of the problem. I just want to take another moment to thank everyone from FDNY, everyone from PD, Health, DHS, all of our nonprofit partners, because, you know, they every single time made people's lives better. They convinced people to come in. They made a real difference time and time again, and we don't thank them enough for that. So I want to take this opportunity to say a profound thank you to each and every one of them. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the commissioner for HRA, and Steve has been doing an outstanding job helping to develop these new strategies. And for us, although we know it's a big challenge, we know that we are putting the right tools on the table to make a difference. HRA Commissioner Steve Banks.
Thank you. It's good to see everybody out here in this beautiful weather. But when it's important to remember when we're out here in this beautiful weather that we had the team that the mayor described, Department of Homeless Services, FDNY, EMS, Police Department, and our terrific not-for-profit partners helping 27 people come in off the streets last night in a particularly cold weather. We're not used to seeing that in April all the time, but nonetheless, people were out last night doing the work that is so important. Homestat is something that no city has tried before. There have been outreach efforts going back over decades, but no city has tried to put together this kind of team effort that joins together frontline not-for-profit staff who are out there night after night trying to bring people in, with Department of Homeless Services staff, with the other agency staff, to look at each person individually, but also to look at the systemic things that we can learn from each case through a citywide case management system. That's what's going to make the difference, and I'm so happy to have Michael with us, with all of his experience and all of his wisdom, and to be working with the Mayor's Office of Operations and under Mindy Tarlow's leadership to bring together all of the agencies in one team to address homelessness. As many of you know, I've been working with homeless people in the city for more than 3 decades, and I have never seen this kind of citywide effort to address this problem. The 25 people that were able to be brought into placements last week when the weather was nicer are testament to what has been going on over these last weeks as we have been implementing Homestat. It starts with you, the public, calling 311, or it starts with a city worker who sees somebody. And I encourage you to call 311 because that's how help starts if we don't see the person. But these are human beings, and the 311 calls matter. The canvassing by city staff to identify people matter. That results in an evaluation about whether it's a law enforcement matter, in which case the police should be deployed, or whether it's a situation in which we want to try to give somebody a helping hand. And the partnership between Department of Homeless Services and the Police Department's Homeless Outreach Team is another important element. The mayor announced this back in December, that instead of having different approaches in the Police Department, would have a special unit. That is really helping us. It helped us this winter to have that kind of an approach. And once that call comes in, either the Police Department goes out or our outreach workers go out, and then the process of engagement begins. The road to get to the street, the path to get to the streets was not a linear one for people, and it's not easy to get them off. But the kind of sustained attention, the sustained focus that Homestat is bringing to bear is so critical. And when we succeed, every person we can bring in is a success, but we want to succeed to keep people off the street on an ongoing basis. And that's where the case management effort that Michael is going to be helping us put together is so critical, because that's what's going to make the difference in people who thus far have resisted help. Our outreach workers try repeatedly to bring people in, and they succeed. But where they don't succeed, we want to bring to bear all the resources of the city for individuals who have resisted help, to get them the help that matches what their needs are and bring them in. And we're going to keep after this case by case as we proceed forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Steve. I want to bring up one of the leaders of the nonprofit efforts to reach people on the streets. And I have to tell you, some of you were with us a few weeks back. We were in the subways, and we were talking to folks on a very cold day. And when you see, I was absolutely moved by the outreach workers who were with me, because they had such compassion for the folks who they were speaking to, and they understood the complexities of what people had been through. And they really worked to persuade each homeless person to come in and get the help they needed. And there was something almost pastoral about it, the fact that they thought so deeply about each person as an individual and really listened for what they needed. In many cases, knew the individuals over months or even years. So this is such important work, such really dignified work, and I want to thank everyone who does it. And as an example of this good work, I want to bring forward Bill Hughes, the program director for Street to Home Manhattan.
I'd like to say thank you to Mayor de Blasio and to Commissioner Banks for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about the great work that all of the street outreach teams are doing on a daily basis. I've been working with the street outreach teams in various capacity for 6 years, and I'm honored to have had the opportunity to have worked with great nonprofit organizations like Breaking Ground, the Center for Urban Community Services, and Goddard Riverside, all wonderful agencies that do great work. There's never a quick fix to the set of circumstances that cause someone to become street homeless. Helping someone move from living on the street to finding a permanent home is a process that I have seen take months or in some cases even years. I've witnessed firsthand, however, how the persistence, compassion, and sincerity of an outreach worker can help a person that some might consider too far gone to eventually come inside and accept housing. This even includes people with severe mental illness that I have personally witnessed scream at a worker on the first engagement or even run away from an outreach worker in the beginning of engagement. The thing about the outreach teams is that they don't give up on people, but with the assistance provided in support of housing, they often find jobs, reconnect with family members, and go on to live full and enriched lives. The team at Breaking Ground Street to Home Manhattan is very excited to see the mayor's commitment to provide additional resources to those living on the street. This includes funding to increase the number of outreach workers, creating more safe havens, and bringing on more supportive housing units. With these additional resources and the ongoing commitment of compassionate and skilled outreach workers, we are excited to be able to make an even larger impact for those living on the street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, man. Finally, we've had tremendous support in this initiative from the City Council, and the City Council members are crucial voices in helping us think about how we approach each community and people in need in the community, but also try to address the quality of life needs of all of the residents of the community. And in particular, I want to thank Councilmember Ben Kalos for his focus on these issues and his support. Welcome him to speak. Councilmember Ben Kalos.
Thank you to Mayor de Blasio and Commissioner Steve Banks for leading this effort and really taking on the homeless crisis. And thank you to all the agencies that are here today and every night. I see the Fire Department, NYPD, DOH, APS, DSNY, and our partners in the nonprofits. We can't solve this problem alone, but together we can make a difference. I hear a lot about mandates, but we only do that once a year, and it's usually on the coldest night. It's been rescheduled in the past 2 years because it was always so cold, and we've been getting what I think are probably lower numbers than otherwise. But the fact that we're actually going to go out and start doing this on a quarterly basis in warm months and in cold months so we can get an accurate count of how many people are really on the street is a big deal. And all of this is coupled with the fact that it's going to be happening transparently so that residents can see the results, see what's happening. And so we're a big supporter of this, and we've also gotten a coalition together on the East Side for the East Side Task Force for Homeless Outreach and Services. We work closely with HRA and DHS to make sure that the faith-based institutions can participate in all the programs that this mayor is rolling out. From opening doors to supportive housing. I will get supportive housing built in my district with your help. We will take your money to do so. And anything we can do to help the people who are on the streets, off the streets. I just want to take one quick moment to just talk about who the homeless are. And so it's not just this big number out there. It's 23,000 children. We have children who wake up in a homeless shelter and go to public schools in my district. The next big number is 17,000 families, 17,000 family members who have these children, and they're waking up in a shelter, and then they're going to work, they're caring for their families. And then we have about 13,000 or so single adults. But when we talk about homeless, and as I remind my constituents day in, day out, is These aren't people who have ever really done anything, especially when you're talking about children and families. This is a symptom of the affordable housing crisis and the fact that people get forced out and they're on the streets. And luckily, we've done something about that on the MIHCQA under this mayor's leadership. So hopefully, taken together, we'll continue to chip away at the problem, one person at a time, 25 people at a time, and together we can and will make this city great. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that. We're going to take questions on this topic, but I also want to say you see such a range of agencies here. Catherine Garcia is here because sanitation plays a crucial role in helping us keep, of course, all communities clean, but also plays a role when we make sure that if people have left stuff behind that is going to take away from the quality of life of a community, that sanitation is there to clean it up. Our Parks Department plays a role. We work closely with them. We want to thank everyone here from the Parks Department, including the folks who do enforcement for the parks and the officers who patrol the parks. We thank all of them for the good work they do. We look at this as an effort across all our agencies, and Homestead is going to bring all that energy and all that capacity together. Again, want to thank Mike Jacobson for stepping up and bringing his leadership and his experience to this effort. All right, happy to take questions on this topic.
Can Dr. Jacobson step up to the mic? I have a quick question for you. Your former boss, Mayor Giuliani, has been fairly critical of this mayor. What do you make of his criticism?
You know, I make of it that it's political, you know, my job here is not to, you know, sort of take apart the sort of politics of this or the sort of critical political arguments that go on. There's a real social issue here that's been apparent for every mayor, right? This is, you know, I started with Koch, right? And homelessness was a key issue back then, and it's been for every single mayor that's had this job. And this is probably the most focused and resource-intensive attention that's been paid to it. And as a result of that, you know, it's fair for the public and for the mayor to expect results. So, you know, those kinds of criticisms, I'll let the big dogs handle, right? I mean, my job is to work with Mindy and her staff and the agency heads to try to get something done.
Well, respectfully, Mayor Giuliani says the approach is wrong. He says that's, I think his words were, tough love is required. Do you agree with him on that?
You know, I don't even know what that means exactly. You know, I think what's required is understanding exactly why some of these, especially the thousands of chronic homelessness, are on the streets and what you have to do to get them off into safer, better places. You know, if tough love is in there somewhere, again, I don't know how to operationalize that, then fine. I don't go into this at all with any sort of political lens. It's a social problem. It's going to require hugely complicated solutions and a lot of dedication, and then I'll leave it to others to describe what those solutions are.
All right. Yes.
Yeah, I'm a local resident. I support you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to do media questions. Can I see you after? Because this is a press conference for media, but I'll see you after for sure. Yes.
So the Homestead teams have already been out on the streets, right?
Yes, the teams have been out on the streets. They're not at full strength. They'll be at full strength by the end of the month, meaning we will have hired up the entire personnel complement. But over the last few weeks, they have been out and operational.
So does that mean that you have a sense at this point of what the current street homeless population is?
Online, you can see what the folks who've been doing the daily canvass have been seeing, but we are not saying that's the same thing as a full citywide count or a nighttime count. So this is an important point. Daytime and nighttime, two very different realities. The public, understandably, focuses often on the daytime reality. That's what they see on the way to work or coming home or during the day when they're in their neighborhood. And that, again, is certainly one part of that is folks who are homeless 24/7. And that's what the focus of Homestead is. The folks who are chronically homeless, permanently homeless, getting them off the street. But during the daytime, you see people who do have shelter, for example, but are still out on the street during the daytime hours. Even in the case of some panhandlers, we see people who actually have a home but for whatever reason are panhandling. So the daytime reality is a little different. We're tracking that every single day with the workers. The nighttime reality we're going to be doing on a regular basis as well, but we have not done that yet. So we'll be portraying different elements of the problem, but we'll be putting it all online as we see it.
Any sense of what you participated in the Hope count
Yes.
earlier? When are we going to know the numbers from
Steve,
that?
what do you know?
I mean, as you know, the Hope Count is a national count required by HUD, and we expect in the coming weeks that we'll have our usual submission to HUD, and the number will be there. But I think one of the things that we certainly saw when the mayor announced Homestead and when the 90-day review proceeded is that we wanted to do more than what the Hope Count has been, which is that once-a-year point-in-time count done across the country. That's why the count that's going to begin in May for our own three times a year count will add to our knowledge and help us direct services. The daytime count helps, our own nighttime counts will help, and the HUD count helps. It's all part of assembling the puzzle, working with Mike, and we're working with all the agencies to be able to focus on each individual. So the more information we have about where people are, the more effective we're ultimately going to be, and the public will see the numbers as we put them up.
Just one more. Do you have any sense at this point, given the work that's already been done in Homestead and trying to get this fuller picture of the street homeless population, whether or not, well, what the number actually might be and whether or not it has grown from last year?
I think we're going to just have to leave that to see all the numbers put together. I know, what the tendency is to see one number and say that's the number, but we're very consciously looking at multiple numbers. As Michael said, it's a complex problem. We're looking at the day number to see what kind of services we can deliver during the day. We're going to look at the Hope number as indicative of what was going on in the winter. We're going to look at the May number as indicative of what's going on that night. And we're going to use all of these numbers to ensure that we're the most effective in our delivery of services to clients, which is the reason why the mayor wanted the 90-day review, to ensure that our delivery of services are timely and effective to clients. And we'll be putting up the information so that everybody can see what we're learning, and you can learn it as along with us.
But the simplest, to your question, I think the simplest way to think about it is obviously very hard to get a perfect number at any given point in time. But what we can say is if we can identify where any individual is on a regular basis, this is why we really want people to call in and we want to show people what we're seeing and encourage more calls. If we can identify where an individual is who's homelessness and we can engage them consistently enough, that opens up the door to actually achieving our long-term goal for that person, which is to first get them off the street to a safe haven or to a shelter, and then ultimately get them to some kind of permanent housing. Therefore, the best measure on one level is person by person. We're literally going to be able to say, and this is what Michael's going to organize, we're going to be able to say, here's the first person, and with this person, we eventually got that person off the street after 3 months, 4 months, and then now they're in this shelter, and now we're trying to get them to permanent housing. We're going to be able to track each person's trajectory, and we'll be able to measure success by seeing how many people we get off the streets and how long they stay off the streets and how many people actually don't come back to the streets. That, of course, will take months to be able to, really see how much success it's having. But in some ways, to your question, that's going to be the truest measure, is when we can look at individual cases and see that there was a different kind of outcome than what happened before. Yes?
Mayor, right before you started speaking, a gentleman who was sitting over there who appeared to be homeless was escorted away by 2 NYPD officers. Just wondering if you could give us a sense of what kind of outreach that person might get, and if that sort of interaction speaks to some of the difficulties that, is presented.
I don't know what happened in the interaction, but we can talk about the kind of support anyone would get.
I mean, the interactions between the homeless outreach team from the police department and the not-for-profit teams are complex. I'll give you an example. In this very park, there are a number of individuals that the outreach teams are working with. One of them, I'll call him Mr. A, is someone that the outreach teams work with. They're able to convince him to come in, and he's in a safe haven. On the other hand, he is familiar with this particular location, and he comes back here periodically. But what's important about this sustained effort by the outreach teams and the canvassers through Homestead is that we know where he is, and if problems develop, we can help connect him back. But we're very happy that that particular individual is in a safe place overnight, although he's, of course, free to do do whatever any New Yorker can do during the day. But it's that kind of individualized approach that we have been bringing to bear. We've always said, however, that Homestead had two elements. One is a law enforcement element to ensure that the laws are being complied with, and the other is a helping hand element to ensure that we offer a helping hand to people who need help to get off the streets.
Chief, why don't you talk a little bit about the work PD is doing?
I'm Chief Bill Morris. I'm the chief of Manhattan South. Just to echo what the commissioner and the mayor were speaking about before, what the police department is doing now is we're taking more than just a law enforcement approach to the challenge. Many police officers now are trained in crisis intervention training. In fact, the officers who patrol in this park on a regular basis have received that crisis intervention training. Recent graduates of the academy have received that crisis intervention training. It gives us another tool in the toolbox, not just law enforcement, but also to begin the process of offering people assistance. And I think the commissioner said it well before when he said that just the initial encounter may not always be positive. The challenge is to keep going, not to be defeated, to keep going beyond that and to get an eventual positive solution regarding it.
Well said. Well said.
Off-topic questions?
We're just doing on topic right now. Behind you, yes?
Is your expectation that every unsheltered homeless individual will have a caseworker assigned to them, or will there not be enough resources?
So, Steve, come forward, or Mike, both, either. The expectation is that every single individual will be followed up on. And this is important, that each person, there'll be information on what they need, what their challenges are, how often they've been engaged, what seems to be working, what doesn't work, if they've come in off the street for a period of time. All of that needs to be collected for each person, and they're going to be looked at on a regular basis. Talk about, either one of you, how that will work in terms of our personnel.
I mean, again, it begins with our Homestead canvassers who will be documenting that they observe someone in a particular location, and then it continues with our homeless outreach teams through the not-for-profit organizations as well as the police homeless outreach team to gather as much information to determine how we can help somebody. But imagine the situation that we're confronting across the city. For somebody, we might have the person's name, Joe Smith or Joan Smith, and we may know something. Someone else we just may know as tall individual with a red hat. But we're going to keep that information that tall individual with a red hat was there, and we're going to work to get that person's name and get as much as we can to bring that person in. Now, that work has been going on every day before Homestead. But the difference is that Homestead's going to collect it all in one place so that we can bring to bear all the city agencies on helping tall person with a red hat to find out who he is and help get him off the street. And that's a new approach that hasn't been tried before.
Right. Is there an expectation that with the increased resources that you'll be able to be reaching basically everybody who's unsheltered?
Yes, that's the bottom line. And I think your question, just putting a further point on it. So this work is done by DHS through a lot of the nonprofits. So DHS will ultimately have responsibility for everyone who's identified having a particular case for them. In other words, we'll collect all the information about them. A particular caseworker who's working on that case obviously could be working on a number of people at the same time. But to your point, I think the simple answer is yes, it will be a very personal approach in that way. So there'll be responsibility for a caseworker in terms of what happens with their cases. And that will be managed by DHS through the nonprofits. Yes.
I know you guys have said before that a lot of the street homeless population are people who are already known to law enforcement, right? Can you give us some sense, maybe like percentage-wise, of how much of this population is static or has been on the streets for a certain period of time? It's different than the shelter population that's churning in a way?
Yes, and so let me start and then offer my colleagues a chance to come up. Very important distinction you make between street homeless and folks in shelter. You're absolutely right. Folks in shelter, a lot of folks, as you heard earlier, are working. A lot of families, we're doing everything we can to get them out of shelter. You've heard us talk about the 22,000 folks we've gotten out of shelter and to permanent housing. So there is a lot of movement in that situation. Unfortunately, on the streets, you do see a number of people who've been on the streets for a long time, and our colleagues can give you a little bit more of the details of that. But to the previous question as well, this is a finite problem. It's a city of 8.5 million people, and at least according to what we saw from recent few years with the Hope count, the street population is 3,000 or 4,000. It's finite. It's reachable. So the goal is literally to identify every single person. To Steve's point, there are some people on the street right now that the city government doesn't know the name of. That's how it's been done over the years. We don't accept that. We believe we should be able to know each and every person, what their profile are, what their needs are, because they are reachable if we put enough energy and enough focus into it, and that then we could actually make a tangible impact on their lives. But since a lot of them haven't even been identified or engaged systematically, it's not a shock that they didn't come off the streets. In terms of the history and the length of time, can you give some perspective?
I mean, my perspective in working with homeless people for 3 decades, don't speculate. The whole purpose of Homestat is to collect data that's not been collected before so that we can gain a greater understanding of the full range of needs of people that are on the streets. Historically, the focus has been on the numbers of people that have been chronically on the streets, which is a smaller number than the larger number of people that have been on the streets. But as the mayor has emphasized repeatedly, this is a focus on all of the people that are on the streets. Some are there who are housed, and we want to be able to focus on what's going on there, and some are there who are unsheltered. And so the information that we're collecting is going to allow us to make the kinds of conclusions you're asking about. And the whole reason, I think, why Homestead is such an important initiative is it's for the first time going to give us that kind of perspective and that kind of information to solve a problem which has been here for many, many years.
Are you planning to return any of the contributions you
We're on
received
this
from
topic.
Jonah Recknitz?
We're on this topic, my friend. Anything else on this topic? That's all we're doing today.
Can you explain what a hub client is and how many folks are involuntarily committed in HHC facilities? Perhaps Dr. Raju can address that.
Well, again, Dr. Raju can come up, but that's the point. Is this is different from that. So what we're trying to do here with Homestead is identify folks who are street homeless and get them to the help they need. The hub is a concept focusing on folks who have persistent mental health challenges, have treatment plans that in too many cases haven't been followed, and also a history of violence. They're two very, very different things. Any other questions on this? Yes.
On this topic.
Yes.
When you talk to some of the street homeless, they say they don't want to go to shelter because they can't bring their stuff, they can't bring their pet, they think it's too dangerous. So as a tactical perspective, perhaps this is really for an outreach worker, what do you say to that? They don't want to go to shelter, and I know you said you're going to have more to tell us next week about the review, but it has been more than 3 months. Is the review complete? When should we expect to see some of
Yeah, the review's complete, and we're still finalizing the actions based on the recommendations, and next week you'll hear a lot more. But we can certainly speak to the first part of your question, and maybe you'd like to give some perspective on that as well.
Sure. Our team has done everything from reach out to the Human Resource Administration to get assistance for a homeless person that needs storage to help get someone inside. We have worked with clients with severe mental illness who hoard belongings, and we've stayed with them on the street and watched their belongings while we take them to look at a shelter. And then when they are agreeing to go inside, we'll help them get their belongings there. So, we think of innovative ways to get people to go inside all the time, and it's just an example of a couple things we've done.
Good. Steve, you want to add anything? Height. Oops. There you go.
I think your question again highlights the importance of this new approach. By taking a citywide approach, we will have information about, again, let's say John Smith won't come in because afraid of where he or she would put their stuff. And so there'll be a solution to that. There's a storage grant that we could provide to store the person's belongings. Or someone else might say, I won't come in because I'll never store my belongings because that person has mental health challenges and hoards their belongings. So for each individual, they have individualized reasons why they're on the streets. They have individualized reasons that got them on the streets, and we're going to take an individualized approach to help bring them off the streets.
Last call on this topic.
Kevin Tarr, Columbia University. So I know a lot of homeless people don't have proper identification, don't have licenses. Will that hurt the effort in getting proper numbers and accurate numbers for the data you're trying to collect for homeless people in the city?
I don't think it hurts the effort because, as Steve said, we can, in terms of count, we can do that even if we don't happen to know someone's name. But our goal is to know their name, know their story, know their reality, and be able to address it very personally and directly. Last call, yes.
I'm wondering if internally you have any sense of whether the street homelessness number is up or down.
Again, we're still finalizing the Hope Count numbers, which give us something, but I've been very clear about the fact that the Hope Count is a very broad measure. The numbers that you're going to start to see over time from Homestat are going to give us, I think, a lot more. So, let's be real, that once a year, a single night, or a sample, a random sample, that's the best we've ever had. This is something entirely different. This is a constant daily canvas. And even the nighttime piece is going to be done more frequently, but it will take months for us to get a fuller picture. The bottom line is, while we're getting that fuller picture, we're starting the effort in earnest to get each individual off the streets into something better.
Do you have any sense of what the folks in green behind you have told you?
What the folks in green have told me about what?
About where the number is going. Are they saying more, fewer, the same, less?
Folks in green, would you like to say anything? Come and share. Jess, you don't have to share the overall numbers because no one's quite clear until we do the count, but anything you want to say about your experience?
Sure. Well, I'm Cesar Venegas from Goddard Riverside, and what we're seeing in the streets, we have the teams out there 24/7. We definitely see a lot of individuals when it warms up during the day, and they already described that the day number is much different than the street number at night, and individuals on the street, sleeping on the street with no place to go. So until we gather further data and really compile it, I think it's tough to really pinpoint on whether it's on the rise or not. During the day, just climate impacts it a lot, so we're probably going to see a lot more visual homelessness during the day while you're going to work or going home.
Can you spell your name first?
CESARVANEGAS.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
No off-topic questions?